Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn, and welcome to episode 5 of my Q&A series. I received a number of questions about how high you could fly under various scenarios, so I thought I'd try to tackle them all in one session. Now, if you have a question, drop me an email at dondroneson@gmail.com and you may see it answered in a future video. Let's get into it. And again, if you want to play the home edition of DonDronesOn, just pause the video after each question, scream out your answer at the top of your lungs, and we'll see if the neighbors complain and if our answers match. All right, first question. Hi, Don. My question is, can I fly over high buildings like in downtown Toronto or on top of kilns? How high can I go? Maybe 100 feet on top of X height, right? Well, this one gets to the core of the altitude regulation 901.25. But this is such a poorly worded regulation, a lot of people get confused by it. And a quick aside before we move on. It's this kind of poorly worded, confusing rule, and there are many others like it, that absolutely drive me nuts. If you haven't already done so, please join the newly formed Drone Pilot Association of Canada. Membership is free. DPAC is advocating for improved regulations for regular drone pilots like you and me. Transport Canada must start listening to our concerns about overly complex and confusing regulations like this one. And the more members we have, the stronger our unified voice will be. Okay, back to the question. Here's a plain language translation of this rule. Your maximum altitude above ground level is the greater of 400 feet or 100 feet above buildings or structures when you're within 200 feet horizontally of them. And I'm using feet because Transport Canada chose nice round feet distances. After all, we switched to metric 40 plus years ago in 1975, so there's certainly no reason to start getting into meters quite yet. Still confused? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Here's your regular maximum altitude, 400 feet above ground level, that blue line. And if you're within 200 feet of a really tall structure or building, your ceiling bumps up to 100 feet above that tall structure. It's as if tall buildings make a bit of a bubble around them. And because manned aircraft are certainly going to be flying well above any such buildings or structures, it is reasonably safe to fly your drone at that height. So yes, assuming you're complying with other rules like visual line of sight and controlled airspace restrictions, you can fly over skyscrapers in Toronto and even over the Inco Superstack in Sudbury, which is 1,280 feet high. Just for fun, I also looked up the tallest buildings in Canada and was a bit surprised to see the very, very long list. At least 200 buildings over 400 feet tall. Mostly in Toronto, but there are some in pretty much every major city across the country. Question number 2. And actually there were several variations of this one. I don't understand this AGL thing. When I'm flying perfectly horizontally, my DJI Fly app says my altitude is always the same, even if I go over a hill. I don't understand. Okay, so AGL means above ground level, and that means the height above the ground where your drone actually is. So if you're flying horizontally over a hill like this, your real altitude above the ground is reducing. You're getting closer to the ground. And notice that your legal ceiling is going up because it's measured over every point on the ground, following the profile of the ground. But why does the DJI Fly app show your altitude always the same when you're flying over this hill? Well, it's because the app shows your altitude relative to your launch site. The app doesn't have the ground elevations built into it. So that's all it shows, your drone's height compared to where you took off. It's actually a bit odd, to be honest, that DJI doesn't offer both figures because there are databases of ground elevation available. For example, Drone Pilot Canada shows the elevation if you simply tap the map. So here it's 607 feet above sea level, and over here it's only 414 feet. This is the Niagara Escarpment. But I suppose tracking this kind of data in real time while also controlling your drone may get a bit tricky for the DJI software. So we're stuck with what we get. Oh, and by the way, the DJI app has a default maximum altitude built into it. So depending upon the height of the hill, if it's like, say 400 feet high, the app may stop you from going over it, even if legally you certainly can. The solution is to go into the safety menu and adjust your maximum altitude setting there. Notice that DJI gives you a warning when you do this. So you're on your own, legally wise. You've signed away your life. Okay, now another scenario. Question number 3. I have a question about flying off the top of a cliff. Suppose the cliff is 100 meters high. Am I breaking the law if I start out at 30 meters and fly right over the edge? Well, the short answer is yes, you could be in trouble. Here's my crude drawing of a cliff. Maybe it's not high enough. The legal ceiling follows the profile of the ground, like I said before. So if you're flying up here, but you go out over the cliff, you could easily be exceeding the limit at that point over the edge of the cliff. This is certainly something to be aware of if you're flying around rough terrain or say the Niagara Escarpment or other cliffs like that. Well, there we have it. 3 interesting questions about your maximum flight ceiling in Canada. And before we go, I should say that parts of this rule vary quite a bit from country to country. So maximum altitude rules are definitely worth checking into carefully if you're traveling. Okay, that's it for today. Send your questions to me at DonDronesOn@gmail.com and you may see them answered in a future video. And be sure to become a member of the Drone Pilot Association of Canada, or DPAC. Membership is free, and there's a link in the description of the video. Thanks for watching. Safe and happy flying.